attack Clark right now. Goes to her left. Carlson at the free throw line. That's going to be a foul on Caitlin Clark.
5 fouls. Just 21 minutes on the floor. Only 1 point scored in the first half. If you looked at Caitlin Clark's stat line without watching the game, you might assume she simply had an off night. But that's not what many fans saw when they watched Indiana's matchup against Portland unfold. Instead, what they witnessed was a game that immediately sparked controversy, frustration, and a wave of criticism directed toward both the officiating crew and the Fever coaching staff. By the final buzzer, social media was flooded with clips, screenshots, and breakdowns from fans trying to understand exactly how one of the league's biggest stars ended up spending so much of the night battling foul trouble instead of controlling the game. Every replay seemed to generate more questions than answers. Why were certain whistles being blown?
Caitlin Clark, if anything, she got elbowed. There's Caitlin Clark's first foul. Somebody tell me where's the foul? There was 2.
Why was contact allowed on one end of the floor but not the other? And perhaps most importantly, why did Indiana seem unable or unwilling to push back as the situation continued to escalate? For many Fever supporters, this wasn't simply about one loss in the standings. It was about the feeling that the game was being played under 2 different standards. Every possession appeared to add another layer to the debate. Every whistle seemed to increase the frustration. And as Clark spent more time looking toward the officials than attacking the defense, the momentum of the game slowly began slipping away from Indiana. What happened during those 40 minutes has now become one of the most talked about WNBA stories of the week. And when you start breaking down the sequence of events from start to finish, it's easy to understand why emotions remain so high. From the opening tip, Portland's defensive strategy was obvious.
It's a tough board. Hustles ahead down the floor. Barker running the wing. Barker to the cup. Up and under. Knocked to the floor. And this will be a foul.
Was to make every touch, every cut, and every possession difficult for Caitlin Clark. They picked her up early. They pressured her in the backcourt. They crowded passing lanes. They challenged her space whenever she attempted to initiate offense. Physical defense is nothing new in professional basketball, especially when facing a player capable of taking over a game. The question many observers raised afterward wasn't whether Portland played aggressively.
Wants to move Enxler out of there. On the wing, kicks it over. Enxler inside. Gustafson catch and foul.
I tell you what, it's good that they're not living by the 3, dying by the 3.
Late. Carries it through, and that foul whistled late.
Boundaries of that physicality were being enforced consistently. Fans watching the game repeatedly pointed to moments where Clark appeared to absorb significant contact while trying to navigate screens, create separation, or attack off the dribble. Each time the Fever star attempted to establish rhythm, she found defenders leaning into her, disrupting her movement, and forcing her into uncomfortable situations. Normally, when a player receives that level of attention, at least some of those interactions result in fouls being called. Instead, possession after possession passed without a whistle.
Just settled in offensively late. How about the all-wheel drive?
She is so quick, just a little hesitation, attacks the hip of Clark, and then
That pattern quickly became one of the central storylines of the game. As the minutes passed, frustration grew not only among Fever supporters but among neutral viewers who felt the officiating standard appeared inconsistent. Every missed call seemed to increase the scrutiny, and every replay only fueled the conversation further. The controversy intensified once Clark herself started picking up fouls. That's when many fans began comparing what was being allowed defensively against Clark to what was being called when Clark was involved on the other side of the ball. And according to critics of the officiating, that's where the frustration truly exploded. Several of Clark's foul calls immediately became discussion points online. Viewers replayed the footage from multiple angles, debating whether meaningful contact had actually occurred. Some questioned whether the officials had a clear line of sight. Others wondered if the calls were simply the result of difficult judgment decisions happening in real time. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was undeniable. Every foul carried enormous consequences. For a player whose impact extends far beyond scoring, foul trouble doesn't just affect individual statistics.
One fast break. Caitlin Clark, she can't play defense, they call foul every time. So the girl throws an elbow at her. Caitlin Clark, if it was her, it would have been a charge. I guarantee you that.
It changes rotations, offensive flow, defensive assignments, and the entire rhythm of the game. Once a star player becomes hesitant because of foul concerns, opponents gain an immediate advantage. That reality began hanging over the game almost immediately. Instead of discussing Clark's playmaking, shooting, or leadership, the conversation increasingly shifted toward how many fouls she had and whether she could stay on the floor. What made the situation even more frustrating for Indiana fans was the timing. Basketball is a game of momentum, and momentum rarely moves in a straight line. Teams fight for it. They build it. They protect it. And when they lose it, they often struggle to get it back. Several of Clark's foul calls occurred during moments when Indiana appeared ready to settle into an offensive rhythm. The Fever would string together positive possessions, generate quality looks, and begin building confidence. Then another whistle would arrive. Every stoppage disrupted continuity. Every foul forced Indiana to rethink rotations.
Stephanie White has got to go. This relationship is over. She crashed out and benched Caitlin Clark throughout the game. That is why Caitlin Clark was out of it. This is nasty. The owner needs to step in and fire this goofball, this freaking clown of a coach. See, she's a joke.
Trip to the bench reduced Clark's ability to influence the game. That's why so many conversations after the final buzzer focused not only on the calls themselves but on when those calls occurred. Critics argued that the cumulative effect of those decisions changed the trajectory of the game. Whether that interpretation is completely fair or not, it explains why the debate has become so intense. Fans weren't simply looking at individual possessions. They were looking at the larger impact those possessions had on the game's outcome. Meanwhile, Portland continued executing its game plan with impressive discipline. Their guards remained aggressive. Their offense moved efficiently. And every time Indiana appeared ready to respond, Portland
had 3 assists in the first 3 minutes of the game. Then both her and Aaliyah checked out, I think, around the 6:30 mark. Then Portland went on a 13-2 run. Just what was the reasoning for checking them out, or did they either of them request a sub?
Well, AB's still on a minutes restriction, so she's coming out. And typically that's around the same time that we've been taking Caitlin out before. We didn't in Golden State just because, quite honestly, we did Raven in that environment without another ball handler on the floor. So that's been our typical substitution pattern.
Found another way to maintain pressure. A major reason for that success was the confidence Portland played with throughout the night. Once they recognized the physical style of the game that was being allowed, they leaned into it even more. They challenged passing lanes, crowded driving lanes, and forced Indiana's ball handlers into difficult decisions. As the game progressed, Portland's players became increasingly comfortable. Their execution improved. Their confidence grew. And Indiana found itself spending more time reacting than dictating. For Fever supporters, that sequence became incredibly frustrating to watch. Not because Portland didn't deserve credit for its performance, but because many felt Indiana's best player never received the opportunity to play freely enough to fully impact the game. And unfortunately for Indiana, the controversy surrounding the officiating was only one part of the story. Because as the game continued, another debate was beginning to emerge, one focused on coaching decisions, substitutions, and whether the Fever's sideline response made a difficult situation even worse. When people look back at this game weeks from now, they probably won't remember every made basket or every missed shot.
I guess you guys started on an 8-2 run, and then after Portland took a timeout, kind of split the script. Just what changed either on their end or on your end?
I just thought they were the hungrier team. I thought that they played with a relentless, effort, a relentless pursuit to get to what they wanted, to be disruptive on defense, to get to their spots on offense. I thought their competitive spirit was better than ours.
What they'll remember is the feeling that the game never had a chance to settle into a consistent rhythm for Indiana. By the end of the night, Caitlin Clark had played just 21 minutes, scored 6 points, and attempted only 7 shots. On paper, those numbers look shocking for one of the league's most influential players. But supporters of the Fever argue that those statistics don't tell the full story. They point to the constant foul trouble. They point to the repeated interruptions.
Hole with the board. Clark eyes down the floor. Up ahead, Boston. Great catch. The vision from Clark, and Boston to the rim, and Indiana sprints out to an 8-2 lead.
Point to the fact that Clark spent nearly half the game either sitting on the bench or playing cautiously because another whistle could end her night completely. That's why so many fans walked away from this game feeling frustrated. They weren't just disappointed by the loss. They felt like they never truly got to watch Indiana operate at full strength. Meanwhile, Portland continued benefiting from the flow of the game. Their players remained aggressive. Their confidence grew with every possession. And as the minutes ticked away, Indiana found itself trying to overcome not just an opponent but a game environment that seemed increasingly difficult to navigate. The criticism that emerged afterward wasn't built around a single controversial moment.
Clark in the paint. Retrieves the dribble. Mitchell, what a cut! What a delivery from Clark!
So little.
Was built around the cumulative effect of dozens of moments spread throughout the night. Each whistle, each non-call, each interruption. Together, they created a game that many Fever fans felt was slipping further and further away from their team.
See the season high for the rookie. Gustafson will let it fly from the corner. Oh, it is good! The fourth foul on that last possession, so the foul trouble piling up for Indiana. Excellent. Inside, Gustafson, the flipper, and you can't.
Since I was about 10 years old playing against her at AAU.
Late draws two, flips it up, Gustafson. Gustafson will set the screen late. Over to Gustafson, Gustafson inside, Park defending, Gustafson, Barker at the top. Gustafson down low, you already know.
And while the officiating became one major talking point, another question was beginning to dominate discussions across social media. What exactly was Indiana's coaching staff doing to stop the momentum from turning completely against them? If there is one coaching decision that continues to generate debate, it happened very early in the game. Indiana had started exactly the way any coach would want. The ball was moving. The offense was flowing. Caitlin Clark looked comfortable directing traffic. Aaliyah Boston was establishing position inside. Everything appeared to be working. Within just a few minutes, the Fever had built an early lead and looked like the more organized team on the floor. That's why many fans were surprised when Clark and Boston were taken out during one of Indiana's best stretches of the night. To be clear, substitutions are a normal part of basketball. Every coach manages minutes. Every coach follows certain rotation patterns. But what frustrated many observers was the timing. Indiana wasn't struggling. They weren't desperately searching for answers. They weren't trying to stop a run. In fact, they were doing the exact opposite.
Get her out of here. And Caitlin Clark addressed it and let it be known that her problem wasn't the fouls, it wasn't the refs. Her problem was Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark come out and let it be known. Let's go, man. This is crazy. I can't believe Stephanie White got some nerve like she's some championship coach to be talking to Caitlin Clark.
They were creating momentum. For critics of the decision, that's what made it so difficult to understand. They looked at a lineup that was succeeding and wondered why it needed to be changed at that specific moment. As soon as the substitutions occurred, the complexion of the game began shifting. Whether that shift was directly caused by the rotation or simply happened to occur afterward remains a matter of debate. But what cannot be debated is the fact that Portland immediately began playing with far more confidence. Momentum in basketball can disappear astonishingly fast. 1 minute a team looks completely in control. The next minute they're chasing the game. That's exactly what happened during the stretch that followed. Portland seized the opportunity and attacked aggressively. Their pace increased. Their confidence grew. Every successful possession seemed to energize them even further. Meanwhile, Indiana suddenly looked different. The offensive rhythm that had been present during the opening minutes became harder to find. Possessions became less fluid. The spacing wasn't as clean. The tempo shifted in Portland's favor. By the time Clark and Boston returned to the floor, the scoreboard looked dramatically different than it had just a few minutes earlier. For many fans, that sequence became the defining stretch of the game, not because it officially decided the outcome, but because it changed the emotional direction of the contest. Instead of Indiana dictating terms, Portland was now controlling the pace and forcing the Fever to respond. From that point forward, Indiana spent much of the night trying to recover what it had lost.
Bro, get her out of here, bro. Get her out of here. Caitlin Clark said it. The refs, Caitlin Clark had 5 fouls. Normally, she talked greasy about the refs. She let it be known. The refs wasn't my problem. I had no problems with the refs. You know who my problem was. It's this clown Stephanie White.
Following the game, questions about those substitutions naturally became one of the first topics addressed by reporters. The explanation centered around established rotation patterns and long-term player management. Coaches often rely on those systems because they provide consistency across an entire season, and to be fair, there is logic behind that approach. Managing player workloads matters. Maintaining structure matters. Ensuring players remain healthy throughout a long season matters. However, critics argued that basketball games don't always follow scripts. Sometimes a game demands flexibility. Sometimes momentum is so valuable that sticking rigidly to a schedule creates unnecessary risk. Sometimes coaches have to recognize when their team has found something that is working and allow it to continue a little longer. That's the perspective many frustrated Fever supporters adopted after this game. They weren't necessarily arguing against substitutions themselves. They were arguing about timing. They believed Indiana had discovered an advantage early and then voluntarily stepped away from it. Whether that's entirely fair is open to interpretation. But it explains why the discussion surrounding the coaching staff became almost as intense as the discussion surrounding the officiating. What made the loss particularly frustrating is that Indiana still received meaningful production from multiple players. This wasn't a game where nobody showed up. Several members of the roster contributed offensively. The Fever had players scoring, creating opportunities, and competing hard throughout the night. That's one of the reasons the final result generated so much frustration. When fans look at a box score and see multiple players producing, they naturally start asking what prevented that production from translating into a victory. The answer isn't always simple. Basketball games are rarely decided by a single factor. They are usually the result of dozens of small moments adding up over time. A missed rotation here. A turnover there. A questionable whistle. A missed defensive assignment. A substitution that changes momentum. In this particular game, many observers believe all of those factors combined to create the final outcome. Portland deserves credit for taking advantage of opportunities whenever they appeared. But from Indiana's perspective, the lingering question remains whether some of those opportunities could have been avoided entirely, and as the game moved deeper into the second half, those questions only became louder as Portland's offensive confidence continued growing while Indiana searched for answers that never fully arrived.
Talking to Caitlin Clark like this, snatching her out of the game, throwing the clipboard down. Who the f do you think you are? You are a bum. You are a bum. You are a piece of garbage of a coach, man. This is crazy, man. Caitlin Clark has got to get out of Indiana. Caitlin Clark has to get out of Indiana immediately, bro. I don't care how she got to do it.
Lost in all of the controversy surrounding the officiating and the coaching decisions is the fact that several Indiana players actually delivered strong performances. That's what makes this loss so frustrating for Fever supporters. Aaliyah Boston continued to show why she's one of the most important pieces of Indiana's future. She battled inside, fought for position, and consistently found ways to contribute offensively. Every time Indiana seemed in danger of completely falling apart, Boston provided stability. Kelsey Mitchell also delivered the kind of performance fans have come to expect from her. She attacked aggressively, looked for scoring opportunities, and helped keep Indiana within striking distance during several critical stretches. Then there were the contributions from players further down the rotation. Those performances may not generate national headlines, but they mattered. Every point scored represented an effort to keep the Fever competitive despite the growing challenges they faced throughout the game. The frustrating reality for Indiana fans is that those contributions should have mattered more than they ultimately did. When multiple players produce quality offensive numbers, the expectation is that the team will at least have a chance to win. Instead, the Fever found themselves watching the game slowly drift out of reach. That's why the reaction after the final buzzer was so emotional. Supporters weren't looking at a roster that failed to compete. They were looking at a roster that showed signs of potential while still leaving the arena with a double-digit loss. The center of everything remained Caitlin Clark. Her final stat line became one of the biggest talking points of the night. 6 points. 1 made field goal. Limited minutes. Constant foul trouble. For casual observers, those numbers might suggest a player who struggled from start to finish. But many people who watched every possession came away with a different interpretation. Even while dealing with foul concerns, Clark continued looking for teammates. She continued reading defenses. She continued creating opportunities whenever she had the ball in her hands. The problem was that the circumstances surrounding the game prevented her from ever fully settling into an offensive rhythm. Great players often need time to establish control of the game. They need opportunities to feel the defense, understand matchups, and gradually increase their influence over what happens on the floor. Clark never really received that opportunity. Instead, much of her night was spent navigating foul trouble, dealing with physical defense, and constantly adjusting to the changing flow of the game. As a result, Indiana spent long stretches without the version of Clark that opponents fear most. The version that can completely change a game through scoring, passing, pace, and decision-making. One statistic from Clark's performance deserves special attention. Despite everything that happened throughout the game, she still managed to finish with 6 assists while committing only 1 turnover. That number tells an important story. Even on a night when the scoring wasn't there, even on a night when she spent significant time on the bench, and even on a night when foul trouble disrupted her rhythm, she was still creating opportunities for teammates. That's what separates elite playmakers from ordinary players. When shots aren't falling, they find other ways to impact the game. When defenses focus entirely on stopping them, they create advantages for everyone else. When circumstances become difficult, they continue making the right basketball decisions. That's exactly why many Indiana supporters left the game feeling frustrated rather than discouraged. They saw evidence that Clark was still influencing the game positively whenever she had the chance. The issue wasn't necessarily what she was doing with her minutes. The issue was how few of those minutes existed in the first place. Meanwhile, Portland continued taking advantage of nearly every opportunity presented to them. Their offense became increasingly efficient as the game progressed. Ball movement remained crisp. Defensive rotations were attacked aggressively. Open looks were converted at a high percentage. By the second half, Portland wasn't simply playing well. They were playing confidently. Every successful possession seemed to reinforce the belief that they had complete control of the game. For Indiana, that created a difficult challenge. So the Fever weren't just trying to overcome a scoreboard deficit. They were trying to stop an opponent that had already established rhythm, confidence, and momentum. When those 3 elements come together in basketball, games can quickly become one-sided. Portland's offensive efficiency forced Indiana into difficult decisions defensively. Every breakdown was punished. Every mistake became costly. Every missed rotation seemed to lead directly to points. As the lead continued growing, the margin for error became smaller and smaller until Indiana eventually ran out of time to mount a serious comeback. One of the biggest criticisms directed toward the Fever coaching staff after the game involved game management during moments of adversity. Supporters weren't simply questioning substitutions anymore. They were questioning the overall response to what was happening on the court. Every team faces difficult stretches during a season. Every coach eventually encounters games where momentum turns against them. The challenge is finding ways to stop that momentum before it becomes overwhelming. Throughout this contest, many fans felt those adjustments never fully arrived. As Portland's confidence grew, Indiana seemed unable to find a counterpunch. As foul trouble increased, frustration increased as well. As the lead expanded, answers became harder to find. That perception led many supporters to ask difficult questions after the game. Could different adjustments have changed the outcome? Could momentum have been stopped earlier? Could the coaching staff have done more to protect the team's rhythm and confidence? Those questions may never have definitive answers, but what is clear is that the loss intensified scrutiny around every decision made throughout the night. And as the Fever left the floor, the conversations surrounding officiating, rotations, player usage, and coaching strategy were only beginning to gain momentum. As the frustration continued to build throughout the game, cameras eventually captured one of the moments that would later become a major talking point among fans. Sideline interactions are often difficult to fully interpret from the outside. Television cameras only capture a few seconds. They don't provide complete context. They don't reveal every word that was said. And they certainly don't tell the entire story of a relationship between a player and a coach, but that hasn't stopped people from analyzing every frame. The footage quickly spread across social media, with viewers debating what it revealed about the emotional state of the team. Some saw nothing more than a competitive athlete frustrated during a difficult game. Others viewed it as a sign of deeper tensions that may have been building beneath the surface. What nobody questioned was the emotion involved. By that point, Indiana had spent most of the night fighting uphill. The foul trouble had become a major storyline. The deficit continued growing. momentum remained firmly on Portland's side. Naturally, emotions were running high, and when expectations are high, frustration often becomes more visible. That's especially true for star players. Every reaction gets analyzed. Every expression gets discussed. Every conversation becomes a headline. Whether the sideline moment meant more than that is something only the people involved truly know. But the fact that it became one of the most shared clips from the game tells you everything about the level of attention currently surrounding this team. After the final buzzer, attention shifted from the court to the podium. Post-game press conferences often reveal a great deal about how players and coaches view a difficult loss. Sometimes those comments calm tensions. Other times they create even more discussion. In this case, nearly every answer was dissected by fans looking for explanations. Clark approached the questions the way many elite athletes do after disappointing performances. She focused on basketball. She discussed execution. She talked about areas where improvement was needed. And she emphasized the importance of learning from mistakes. Meanwhile, discussions surrounding the coaching staff continued gaining momentum online. Supporters wanted answers. They wanted explanations. Now the spotlight shifts to the future. One loss does not define a season. One controversial game does not determine the fate of a franchise. But certain games become important because of the questions they create afterward. This feels like one of those games. The Indiana Fever remain one of the most closely watched teams in professional basketball. Every game generates attention. Every performance becomes a topic of discussion. And every decision is examined more closely than ever before. That reality comes with having a young star at the center of the organization. The expectations rise, patience becomes harder to maintain, and every setback feels bigger than it otherwise would. The Fever still possess talent. They still have players capable of impacting games at a high level. They still have a roster that many believe can compete with anyone when operating at its best, but talent alone is never enough. Success requires execution. It requires adjustments. It requires consistency. And most importantly, it requires everyone within the organization moving in the same direction. That's why this game has generated so much conversation. It wasn't simply about a final score. It was about whether Indiana is maximizing the potential that so many people believe exists within this roster. When everything is added together, this game leaves behind more questions than answers. Indiana had players producing offensively. They had stretches where the game plan appeared to be working. They had moments where it looked like they were capable of controlling the action, yet by the end of the night, Portland walked away with a convincing victory while the Fever were left searching for explanations. Some fans point toward the officiating, others point toward coaching decisions, others believe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Whatever side of the debate people choose, one thing is undeniable. This game has become one of the most heavily discussed Indiana Fever performances of the season. The conversations surrounding rotations, officiating, player development, and team direction are not disappearing anytime soon. If anything, they're only becoming more intense with each passing game, and that's why the next few weeks could be so important for Indiana. How the team responds will matter, how the coaching staff responds will matter, and how the players respond will matter even more. Because great teams aren't judged by how they handle success. They're judged by how they respond when adversity arrives. The Fever now have an opportunity to show exactly what kind of team they want to become moving forward. What do you think about everything that happened in this game? Was the biggest issue the officiating, the coaching decisions, or a combination of both? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future basketball.